You said that socioeconomic reasons is why people go and colonize the West Bank. I don't find that to be a convincing argument. I mean, I know a lot of people who are stricken by poverty and they wouldn't dare go colonize the remaining 22% of the
so
state.
It's like, people that are very virtuous and they don't want to commit
Well,
war
it's not about being
crimes.
virtuous. It's just about not being a war criminal.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you don't want to.
It's not. I don't.
You don't want to
like,
address
go into
personal
the
blame.
individuals.
They're just following orders. They're just going along with the currents, right?
The nation is going one way. Yeah.
So would you assign personal blame to, say, like a Nazi who's just like, well, fuck, man, everybody else is doing it?
Well,
because I
not
would.
Really, to be completely honest. I know you leftists have extremely high moral standards.
No, brother, my moral standards are don't be a Nazi and don't be a settler in the West Bank. It's pretty fucking low, dude. It's okay, sure. So you have this cultural connection to the land, and that gives you the right to go and colonize Palestine, but a Palestinian who is born in the land physically is kicked out at the barrel of a gun and is not allowed to go back. That's what you're telling me.
You're familiar with like concepts of what makes a war just? Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things in my view is very, very important to make a war just is you have to be able to like win. If you're not going to win, there's no point in fighting. And there's actually usually if you're not going to win, then it's unethical to fight. Like if you're going to lose and you're going to lose people and die, it's unethical to fight. So since they're not capable of doing so, then
the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was unjust because the odds were stacked against them?
Yeah, if I was there, it'd be kind of stupid.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for making the time. Also, I do apologize for being up in the air saying, oh, maybe I'll stream this day, maybe I'll stream that day. I don't have a set schedule. I just kind of, whenever I'm done my other work, will stream. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I got to it fairly late today, but I appreciate you being flexible. The thing that we disagree on is pertaining to the Israel.
Many things.
But the topic at hand today would be pertaining to the Israel-Palestine peace. I use quotations around the peace process because I'm of the belief that the Israelis were never serious about peace and were never serious about adhering to the international consensus of what a just peace looked like. If you have any issues with that, I would like to hear.
I'd say the way you put it right there, I don't think I have any specific issues with, but more like I don't like the expectation exactly that they should.
You don't like
right? Because so you're saying essentially, right, that they have a desire for peace probably. Like after they're dissatisfied with acquiring whatever they want, then they want peace, of course, at the end of the day eventually. But they don't want a just peace according to the international understanding, right?
Well, so when it comes to like the peace process, specifically we're pertaining to the era after 1967, where Israel started a war of aggression illegally and acquired a bunch of land. Do we agree that the 67 Six-Day War was an illegal land acquisition? They launched that war illegally?
I don't know about the land acquisition part, but I do not think that it was an illegal war of aggression, at least in regards to some of the combatants.
Okay, well, maybe we could start with that and then we can get into the peace process just because they're kind of inextricably linked, because the bone of the peace process, like the backbone of it in the international consensus, was Security Council Resolution 242, which came because of that war. So it's kind of hard to talk about the peace process if we don't.
It's a good place to start.
Perfect. Okay, make your case.
So, essentially, Egypt was, before the war, engaging in activities that looked like to a reasonable observer that they were going to invade. And therefore, going to war against them is just. And then I believe that other nations jumped in after that, like the next day.
So what you're referring to on the Egyptian front, what you're referring to is the brinksmanship, right? Where Nasser concentrated troops in the Sinai. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and then there were some other things. I believe there was something regarding the point in Haifa.
Sure, so he closed the Straits of Tiran, he expelled the UNEF force from Sinai, and he concentrated his troops in the Sinai. Those are the 3 points. But typically what Israelis or Zionists will point to as the casus belli was the closure of the Straits of Tiran. So let's tackle all 3 of those of Nasser's decisions, the first being the concentration of the troops in the Sinai. So when it came to his decision to concentrate his troops in Sinai, that was a response to Israeli aggression on the Syrian border, because at the time, Syria and Egypt were in a mutual defense pact, so any aggression against Syria had to necessitate. it would rope in Egypt.
They had some sort of goal for a little bit of turning into one nation.
That was prior. That was the United Arab Republic, but that failed. That was a fucking mess.
Okay.
That was earlier. But they were in a mutual defense pact at this point. Now, as per Moshe Dayan's own assessment, Moshe Dayan, when referring to the Syrian front, Israel and Syrian border, in an interview he gave in 1976 with Tommy Rall of Yedihoth Aharonoth, which is like a newspaper or an interviewing outlet, and this interview was released with the consent of his daughter posthumously, he admitted that 80% of the clashes leading up to the Six-Day War on the Syrian-Israel border was initiated by Israel. He started 80% of those. So the aggression leading up to the Six-Day War on the Syrian front, it's very safe to say, because Moshe Dayan, the man responsible for it, admitted that 80% of that was because of him, was because of the Israelis. And if the Syrians and the Egyptians are in a mutual defense agreement and Israel is aggressing against Syria, that would necessarily rope Egypt in. Funnily enough, that's not actually why Nasser did it. That would be one of the reasons, but the real reason he did it actually didn't have that much to do with Israel. It had to do with Jordan and Saudi Arabia, because Jordan and Saudi Arabia, which were like the monarchies, the conservative monarchies in the region, were mocking him. They were mocking him. There was like this Arab Cold War of like the conservative monarchies and the pan-Arab nationalists. And Nasser was like the head of the pan-Arab nationalists. And he was being taunted by the conservative monarchies in the region. They were saying, hey, you're hiding behind UN forces. You're being soft when it comes to Israel. Could you believe that? They're saying you're being soft when it comes to Israel.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's
So what he does... So what he does, just to really quickly finish, he concentrates his troops. He concentrates his troops in the Sinai, but he also simultaneously gives U Thant, which is the UN secretary, the secretary of the UN at the time, Secretary General. He gives him an assurance that he will not attack Israel. And at the time, the U.S. intelligence services, the Israeli intelligence service, the head of Mossad, his name was Meir Amit at the time. He acknowledged to Robert McNamara that he understood Egypt was not actually going to attack because it had a third of their troops bogged down in Yemen. Levi Eshkol, who was the president in 1967, admitted when he was talking to the IDF in a general staff meeting, he said, just because Nasser concentrated his troops in the Sinai does not mean war is inevitable. And furthermore, Yitzhak Rabin, who was a general, also said Nasser's concentrations were more so defensive in nature and that he wasn't going to attack Israel. There were plenty and plenty. Iser Wiseman, who was the head of the Air Force, he also said, yeah, Nasser was not going to attack. Menachem Begin, who was part of the council, part of the, cabinet for the National Unity Government during the Six-Day War, he said the Nasser's concentrations in the Sinai did not mean he was going to attack. We need to be honest with ourselves, so we decided to attack him. So when it comes to the troop concentrations, there's really no grounds to stand on the idea that A, Nasser was going to attack, and B, the Israelis even thought that Nasser was going to attack because all of the people who were tasked with assessing the situation all confirmed that he wasn't going to attack.
I mean, okay, it's nice when your intelligence says that you don't have anything to worry about, but also the intelligence can be wrong, Yeah,
and they were wrong in, say, like 1973, the October War, right? But that's a different story.
So is it just because the intelligence services assumes that the nation that's amassing troops next to you isn't going to actually attack? And, just because they have troops there doesn't mean they're going to attack. I'll agree that just because you have troops on the border doesn't necessarily mean you're going to attack. But that also, intelligence can be wrong. There's been serious Israeli intelligence failures over the years. There's a prominent one a few years ago. And, it doesn't necessarily comfort someone making an executive decision when they know that their guy can be wrong.
So a few more things I'll add to this, because that's a good point. Intelligence can be wrong. Now, in order to legally launch a war, do you know what you have to go through in order to legally launch a war?
Well, you mean through the UN, right? The UN
well, there's a few options, yeah. So there's a few options. Yeah. Because as per Article 2 of the UN Charter, you cannot just start a war unless, as per Article 51, you're the victim of an armed attack, or as per Article 42, you receive a green light from the UN Security Council, and as per Article 33, you have to exhaust all forms of diplomacy before you resort to war. So those are very important articles to understand, right? You can't just start a war if you're in the process of diplomacy, right? Now,
well, people have done so, but
that would be illegal.
It's not considered very nice, and it is against international law.
Right. It would be illegal because you can only start a war if you're responding to an armed attack as per Article 51, or if you get the green light, Article 42, and after you exhaust diplomacy, Article 33. Now, when it came to the 6-Day War, Nasser sent his deputy to Washington to engage in peace talks because Nasser said, A, I'm going to come to some sort of solution for the Straits crisis. We'll open it up and we'll figure it out. B, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm going to engage in these diplomatic efforts. And as that process was in swing, Israel struck. Israel attacked Egypt. And what they did was they lied. They said Egypt struck first when they were fully aware that they didn't do that. That's another strange thing to do if you're acting defensively, right? Why would you have to lie?
Well, it's actually, it is a lie, but it's not that strange.
It didn't strike first. There wasn't an armed attack, right? As per Article 51.
Yeah, there was not an armed attack that killed people or damaged things.
The thing with that story was Levi Eshkol and the cabinet went along with making up this fake story that Egypt struck first. They cut off diplomatic talks, struck, and then they changed their tone. They reverted back. Because Moshe Dayan, his whole thing was, and you can read a quote from this in John Quigley's legal analysis, he's a legal scholar. He did a legal analysis called The 6-Day War in Israeli Self-Defense. It's a book. He talks about how Moshe Dayan requested military censorship over the first, 24 hours of the war, and he stipulated that Israel, quote, needs to be the victims for the first 24 hours, acknowledging that this is a lie. This is not true. They started the war, cut off diplomatic overtures, and then reverted back and said, well, it was a preemptive strike. And that's where we get into the now infamous anticipatory self-defense argument.
Well, okay, but let's go talk about the blockade, right?
Absolutely, for sure.
Because from what I've seen is that a blockade it's an act of war, right? So that alone,
sure. So
would work.
So Article 51 says that the only way that you can attack is if you are facing an armed attack, right? And as of today, a blockade does constitute an armed attack. But do you know where that comes from?
There's a change in the law.
That comes from, primarily a United Nations General Assembly resolution, specifically 3314, which came in 1974. So that's after 1967. In 1967, the way that armed attack was interpreted was not interpreted anything other than an armed attack. You had to be the recipient of an armed attack. Those further interpretations were built on to that understanding after. So the aforementioned 1974 3314 resolution, the San Remo Manual of 1994, this all came after. So in 1967, an armed attack meant an armed attack. Furthermore, they still cut off the diplomatic process, right? Like Nasser's deputy was going to Washington to resolve the Straits crisis. And furthermore, Nasser didn't even have a blockade. It wasn't a blockade of the Straits of Tiran. What it was actually called in the legal jargon is interdiction of contraband. And since the Straits of Tiran flow through Egyptian territorial waters, he actually had the right during an overarching state of belligerency, which Egypt and Israel had since 1948. They never had a peace treaty. They just had an armistice line.
Yeah.
So under those conditions,
until like the 70s.
Exactly. So under those conditions, you have the right to assert something called belligerent jurisdiction. And under belligerent jurisdiction, you're able to withhold peace rights. And one of those peace rights would be safe passage through territorial waters. And since the Straits of Tiran fell completely within Egypt's territorial waters, he didn't actually have to abide by Israel's stipulation that, if you didn't open this fully, we're going to, launch it. And furthermore, Mayor Amit, the head of Mossad, acknowledged to Robert McNamara, that passage through the Straits of Tiran was not crucial economically for Israel. It was just a political symbol.
Yeah, I know. They have another port.
Exactly.
It's like, and they have more coastline. Yeah. Okay, so it seems like you have a pretty strong case that it is not technically legal, although there was hostile action, and I think there was certainly hostile words from Nasser, and there was an
bellicose language, yes.
Yeah, and there was also sort of an underlying hostility because, like you said, Egypt had never actually declared peace with Israel. Well,
Sure.
they had never come to a peace agreement. They had a ceasefire agreement, but there was no like serious peace agreement. And
So
additionally, there was like not exactly deals, but there was like agreements within Arab nations that they would not accept Israel at the time. That was generally an agreement.
no, so the specific deal was that no Arab country would go behind the backs of the other Arab countries and establish a separate peace with Israel. It was supposed to be all together. That was
Yes.
So when it comes to, just for the audience who may be unsure about this, after the 48 war, there was no peace treaty between Israel and its neighbors. What came in place was an armistice agreement, a ceasefire. And by 1951, the UN said this ceasefire holds what they deemed a permanent character and functioned as a de facto peace treaty. That was in 1951. But in 1956, Israel invaded Egypt again, right? And David Ben-Gurion abrogated the permanent character of that ceasefire, therefore giving Nasser the ability to reassert belligerent jurisdiction. So when it comes to 1967, belligerent jurisdiction is totally reasonable. Nobody could even pretend that these countries didn't experience or share some overarching state of war because, I mean, Israel just invaded not that long ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was like 15 years, but yeah.
Well, it was 56. Yeah, so it's like 11.
10 years, 11. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying there was a hostility. There was like an acceptance that these nations are probably not going to be at peace, or it wasn't quite like a normal peace. There was an acceptance that Israel's not going to settle with Egypt, unless they settle with everyone else. There was a recent closing down of certain things that had been granted to Israel. But since there was no proper legal argument in the UN chart, like, that would go through the UN charter to allow Israel to declare war, then therefore it's an illegal war. Okay,
Correct,
so
yeah.
basically this kind of goes into, like I said in his DMs, I told them I had watched his video on the subject, and so that's why we're talking about it.
Right, yeah.
I have a few things in that video that I did not like, but there's one really major thing,
For sure.
and that ties into that.
Totally
Is
fine.
that in your video, especially towards the end, there's a large focus on international law.
Can I
And
ask
this is
which video?
it was like 50 minutes or so about how the title is something about how Zionists say that Palestinians never accept deals.
Is it the myth of like Palestinian rejectionism or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's an older video, so I'm gonna have a hard time remembering what I said in that. So I'm gonna trust you.
But basically, you talked about international law a lot.
Sure.
And that, I don't know. You're Canadian, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Good researching.
Yeah. Well, I think it says in your
okay.
YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's not secret.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't tried to hide that.
So I'm an American, which you probably assumed. Is that international law in regards to war is somewhat unreasonable.
Okay.
And international law in some areas is very easy for to be enforced. Everyone likes it when it's enforced, and so everyone enforces it generally. Like things like maritime law, there's a little disagreements on, but generally there's agreement on, and it works out well, and it helps international society function. But the laws of war is something that when there is a war, it's very, very common for people to kind of just throw that out the window if they want to. And I'm an American, and we have a long history of doing things that the international world does not like, or in pursuit of a military aim. And sometimes we'll do things that the international world does like, but will still be a war crime. Right. In pursuit of a military aim. And some of the people you talked about, like the McNamara, Vietnam, there's things there.
Familiar.
Okay. Yeah. And also, a specific example of what I'm talking about that makes people feel more sympathetic is Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in the 90s because he didn't want to pay his debts and because he wanted to acquire the land. Pure just hostile reasons. Kuwait had no threat to him. And the U.S. Counter invaded with some allies to kick them out. And while we're doing so, a massive column of tanks and other vehicles is leaving. And what we did is we basically just destroyed everything in that column. And they call it the Highway of Death. And it was a war crime by most people's agreements. But it was reasonable to do it. And because they were a hostile nation, they were going to bound to use those tanks for hostile purposes. And destroying them was an important war aim, and it was also a benefit to international society. So what I think is that I don't really accept that just because something is international law means that you should really
Can I just butt in?
It. Yeah, go ahead.
What I will say is, you and I agree. You and I agree when it comes to international law. I don't think it should be the end-all, be-all when assessing what to do. I agree with that. My issue, and the reason I invoke international law, particularly pertaining to the Israel-Palestine peace process, is because it is so inextricably linked to the international consensus of what a just peace would look like. And the reason I engage in this arena, because you could probably tell, my actual position is a single democratic state.
I know. You don't. At the end of the video, you said, "Well,
yes,
the Arab Peace Initiative, they offered, hey, do this, follow international law, and everything will be great." But you said that wasn't really enough for you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So just to finish my thought, I don't personally put so much value on international law because the way I view international law is I see it as a cudgel where it's lopsidedly applied to serve the ends of what I would consider to be the imperial core. I know you and I would have a strong disagreement on this.
I know what
moral
you mean by
framing.
Imperial core,
right.
But I think I completely agree with you on that. I just wouldn't call it the Imperial core.
Totally fine. So my issue, when I invoke international law, it's not because I'm a stickler for international law or I care that much about it. I invoke it to add an additional layer to my argumentation, which I deem to be ethical argumentation. Ethics and morality is what drives my actual thought process when I try and make my prescriptions, but I typically bolster my arguments with the layer of international law to appeal to people who may be on the fence about a situation or who place more authority in international law. It's not because I genuinely care that much about it.
I know. It's a common thing people do. They want to make the liberals feel bad. So they're like, oh, international law is broken. But like real people who are involved in IR just don't really care that much.
Yeah.
Unless they care if it's bad morally. But like whether it breaks international law is usually not really a consideration.
Yeah.
But it makes the liberals feel guilty or feel the way you want them to feel.
Well, it's important in the context of the two-state solution in the peace process. Now, just for absolute clarity, I'm not a two-state solution advocate. I advocate for a single democratic state with massive reparations for the Palestinians. But I do feel the need to engage in that arena because I feel that the narrative has been hijacked pertaining to the two-state solution because there is so much propaganda and just mythology stating that the Palestinians were the intransigents and the Israelis were trying to take that process seriously. Now, if you and I can agree that the Six-Day War was illegal and Israel shouldn't have launched it, I don't know if we agree on that second point, but do we agree that it was illegal?
I'm not super sure, but it seems to me, and even before like this discussion, I don't care if it was legal or not under international.
Sure. Well, even if you want to like get right, if you want to get right in there too, you could even look at how the Golan Heights were occupied. The Golan Heights were occupied and stormed on the 5th day of the 1967 Six-Day War. And on the 4th day, the Syrians agreed to a UN ceasefire. They were not threatening Israel. That's a direct quote from Moshe Dayan. He goes, on the 4th day of the war, the Syrians were not threatening us. And the next day, they go and steal the Golan Heights. What's the legal or the moral argument for that? If they're not threatening you, and by your own admission, the guy who stormed the Golan said that they weren't threatening them.
Like I said, I don't really care that much about international law in regards to war.
No, to be fair, I don't either. But I'm just bolstering this
but
argument.
From a moral argument, I mean, there can be other like legitimate aims. It can be seen as like a bargaining chip, which is something that the Israelis would definitely want, like a bargaining chip.
Do you think a bargaining chip should come at the expense of Syrian self-determination, invading Syria when they're not threatening you?
Well, I mean, you could definitely say that you'll see like a relatively small part of the nation as a bargaining chip for them
They're
to
still holding on to it,
give you
though.
something in back. Yeah, they are.
They're still holding on to it, and they ethnically cleansed
I don't
95,000 Syrians.
necessarily. That's bad. What do you want me to say?
Yeah, well, it's kind of an
Not the holding
L
on to it
Israel
part, but the ethnic cleansing part is
Okay,
pretty bad.
so we'll get to that then. So the reason I go through this whole charade with the 6-Day War is because after the 6-Day War, after the war in which Israel sees the Sinai Peninsula, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights, then comes Security Council Resolution 242. Are we familiar with 242?
Is that the one about? Describe to me what it is a little bit, and then I'll
Sure. So Security Council Resolution 242 was presented, I believe it was in November of 1967, but I could be wrong about that. But fundamentally what it was this idea, this formula to trade land for peace. So the preamble of Security Council Resolution 242 stresses the, quote, inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war, meaning in the preamble of that resolution, you cannot steal land for war. You have to trade peace for it. You have to trade peace for the land. That's what that resolution put forth. Now, there are tons of issues with this resolution. First among them is that it completely sidelines the Palestinians. It reduces their plight down to a mere refugee problem and excludes them as a national group to the quote-unquote conflict. So that's where I would consider there to be a huge... Exactly, yes. The other issue is that Abba Eban, who was the Israeli foreign minister, I believe at the time, was lobbying Lord Caradon, who drafted the resolution, to remove words so that Israel, the Israeli government, could exploit that resolution to pick and choose which territory it gives back. So if the preamble is saying you cannot steal land for war, what Abba Eban did was he lobbied Lord Caradon to alter the withdrawal clause to make it so that Israel could exploit it and pick and choose which land they could acquire through war, directly, fundamentally negating the entire purpose of the document. Now, there are tons and tons of controversies, another one being the French and Spanish translations don't include that ambiguous language and do state that Israel has to pull out of all the territories it stole in 1967. But Abba Eban said, despite the fact that the UN's rules are that all language versions are equally authoritative, Abba Eban said, my government will only consider the English version binding. So right away, they're operating in terrible faith. Nonetheless, the entire international community after 1967, when the resolution came out, understood the peace process to be A, the working towards implementing Security Council Resolution 242, B, Israeli withdrawal to the pre-67 borders with, if anything, minor and mutual modifications, and C, a peace treaty in exchange for that withdrawal. Are we okay with that? Do we agree with that?
Yeah, it's something you had in the video.
Yeah, well, it's just an indisputable fact. Yeah. It's not like an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they lobbied for a change in the document that they would like, and they did get that. Although, like you said, you know, the general implication, or the general understanding when it came out was not what the concession was, but the concession was in the document, in like the English translation, like you said. I don't know how many translations there were, but it was in the English translation.
Yeah, it was just the English translation that he lobbied for these changes. He actually, funnily enough, tried to lobby Lord Caradon to even remove the preambular clause, the one that stated that you can't steal territory in war. Abba Eban tried to get that removed too, but Lord Caradon was like, bro, this completely fucking negates the whole point. I can't do that. And in Abba Eban's memoir, it's called Personal Witness, you could see him quite literally reminiscing at this time and saying, you know, this resolution gave us, the Israelis, the chance at territorial revision. So he's saying this document that the international community put forth and said that you can't steal land for war during war gives us, the Israelis, the chance at territorial revisionism, negating the entire peace conception in the international consensus right from the jump.
Yep.
right? So
what do you want me to say?
Well, the issue is we're trying to discuss, because again, the prompt, the thing that we're debating is that I see Israel to be the intransigent group and not the Palestinians when it comes to the peace process, the two-state solution, right? So this is important
do you want to like
context.
work your way forward historically now?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do you want to like work your way forward and through time now? Because
yeah, absolutely. So forgive me for maybe overwhelming everybody.
It's good. It's good. The chat needs to like get the context so you can have a good content.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the peace process, with everything, keep everything that we just said in mind. But when we're talking about the peace process, really, liberal Zionists will pretty much point to like three people, right? They'll point to Yitzhak Rabin, they'll point to Ehud Barak, and they'll point to Ehud Omer, as though those are the people who put forth what they consider to be an actual attempt at peace with the Palestinians. Now, my claim is that neither of these three individuals were serious about peace with the Palestinians, and neither conformed to the international consensus. All of them negated it.
Okay. I don't really want to get into the specifics about like whether they were or they weren't. I want to talk more about the international consensus and why I think it's kind of stupid. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, that's totally fine. But again, we would have to agree that, because the thing that we were supposed to debate was the peace process crumbled because of the Israelis, not the Palestinians, right? Would we just concede that and agree to that right away?
No.
Okay.
Not necessarily. I think that the Palestinians want too much in some of their peace proposals, like the one. Like
really?
For peace. Yeah.
Okay. Make your case.
Well, okay. So at the end of that video, you talk about peace proposals, and then you work your way through time. You get to the Arab Initiative for Peace. And you're like, okay, so this is like the best faith, sort of like maybe like a liberal understanding of what a peace could be like, and you don't really like it. You think they're giving too much. You think the Palestinians are conceding too much in the peace proposal. But you think that's sort of like the best faith, and because that's not acceptable to Israel, then it sort of just shows that like they don't care. Well, that's basically what you said.
My point for bringing that up is that when there is an overture that the Palestinians extend, despite the fact that it's a compromise that I think is unacceptable, they compromise way, way too much. Specifically, the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. The Israelis don't even look at it. The Israelis don't even engage. Ariel Sharon, instead of even engaging with the overture, do you know what he did? He launched Operation Defensive Shield, killed a bunch of people in the West Bank.
If I recall, there was something going on there at the time that somewhat justified that. So,
you think
it was
all right? So,
and there's the first Intifada. So.
The first Intifada was largely nonviolent, and that was in the 80s. You're probably talking about the second Intifada.
The second Intifada, right? Okay, so the second Intifada was good.
Second Intifada was before that. It was in 2000, but
okay,
2 years before.
Okay.
Okay.
Think he just did it because?
Well, Ariel Sharon he's notoriously kind of a hawk, right? Like he is the architect of the.
Yeah, I know.
He's the architect of the 82 Lebanon invasion. Do you think he was right to invade Lebanon in 82?
I think it was justifiable. Yeah.
But it was wrong, right?
Why?
Well, because it was illegal and also immoral. They killed a bunch of people, killed thousands and thousands of people. But also,
what was the people? But just action can kill people.
Well, what was the casus belli that they gave forth for invading Lebanon in 82?
That the PLO existed there and was trying to revise Israel's borders and kill the people who lived in it?
No, the specific casus belli they gave was there was an assassination attempt on the London ambassador named Shlomo Argov in the UK, and that was done by the Abu Nidal organization. The Abu Nidal organization were enemies with the PLO, but Menachem Begin and Raphael Eitan and Ariel Sharon blamed that assassination attempt on the PLO, all while the PLO was adhering to a 1-year ceasefire that the UN mediated. And even Israeli scholars like Yehoshua Parath were saying, yeah, the PLO is agreeing to the ceasefire. It's actually a veritable catastrophe for Israel because it's proving to the world that the PLO is actually a potential partner for peace. So what Menachem Begin and Raphael Eitan and Ariel Sharon did was they blamed the Abu Nidal assassination attempt on the PLO, to invade Lebanon. And then when the distinction was brought to them, when they were told, hey, it wasn't the PLO who tried to assassinate Argov, it was Abu Nidal and they're enemies with the PLO. Do you know what Raphael Eitan and Menachem Begin said when that distinction was brought to them?
It was inconvenient for their political...
No, they said, Abu Nidal, Abu Shmidal, we have to strike at the PLO. So they acknowledged that they were wrong, they were lying, that it was the PLO who tried to attack Shlomo Argov. They understood that the PLO was adhering to a ceasefire. They were not threatening Israel. They were adhering to the U.S. brokered ceasefire for at least a year, and they still invaded illegally.
Okay, so...
And then they stayed there for 18 years.
Yeah, I know, and then eventually they left because it was not...
Because Hezbollah whooped their ass.
Well, it wasn't worth it. It was the judgment at the time, right?
Well, yeah, they're calling it our little Vietnam because the resistance was putting up too much of a fight. It wasn't feasible.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens. That sort of situation usually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why they're going to have to leave eventually.
So
right, in the current invasion. But
let's get into because you're arguing that the peace process was derailed because of the Palestinians. I'm arguing that the peace process, despite my distaste for it, and I think an entirely liberated Palestine is what is needed. Despite that, I think that it was the Israelis that sabotaged the two-state solution.
Okay, well, can we go in on what we were talking about a few minutes ago with the Arab Initiative for Peace?
Yeah, sure. That's not even really I would even say that that's not the start of it at all. But if you want to start there, we can start there.
It's kind of like the more recent end, but yeah. So I think that, the general American consensus in the foreign policy world is that Israel should have used the Initiative for Peace as a starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obama and Bush, they didn't necessarily they're not going to necessarily jump on board and endorse this one paragraph long thing as the solution, but they thought, okay, this is good. They're going to negotiate. Israel should negotiate. And I think that was a failure on Israel's part to reach across the aisle and work towards something. And I think that's probably the most recent serious thing that Israel's done wrong.
Well, actually,
in the peace process.
I find the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative to be kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. It's just kind of one somewhat inconsequential example. Whereas I think if you look at the process in its totality, it becomes a lot more clear. Now, we can start with where typically liberal Zionists or just Zionists in general, or just people in general, will claim that the two-state solution peace process started, and that would be with the election of Yitzhak Rabin in his second term in the 90s, right?
Yeah, people usually talk about it.
Cool. So prior to that, a lot of people don't know that there was already negotiations between Israeli and Palestinian negotiating teams that were taking place under Yitzhak Shamir. It was the Washington talks and the, it was just the Washington talks. And this was not fruitful. And it caused the Israelis and the Palestinians to try and go through a back channel through Oslo to get a real peace process going. And then Yitzhak Shamir, he is out of office. He is replaced by Yitzhak Rabin. And everybody knows at this point that Yitzhak Shamir was an intransigent. He wasn't taking the previous peace talks seriously. He was actually a member of the Stern Gang back in Mandatory Palestine. He was a terrorist. The Stern Gang was a terrorist group.
Yep.
They actually, funnily enough, sought an alliance with the Nazis too. Abraham Stern did. He was mad at the British. He was mad at the British for the 1939 White Paper, and he was like, "Fuck this, the enemy of my enemy."
Let's not just have guilt by association.
Right, yeah. You're right. I'm derailing. My apologies. So yes, Yitzhak Rabin takes over from Yitzhak Shamir, and do you know what he does? Fully aware that Yitzhak Shamir was an intransigent, you know what he does? He keeps his negotiating figure as the head of the Israeli delegation for peace talks with the Palestinians. I believe his name was Eliakim Rubinstein. He was a Likud figure, part of the intransigent government. So Yitzhak Rabin, supposedly supposed to be this peace dove, why would he keep the intransigent Yitzhak Shamir figure as the head of the peace talks with the Palestinians?
Well, there can be a lot of reasons. Okay. Just because, the guy could just be simply loyal and therefore he'll be willing to follow orders from the prime minister. Just because he was in the last thing doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get rid of him to institute your change policy. We have in the U.S. oftentimes, well, not much recently, but historically, there's oftentimes been situations where they'll keep some people from the previous government in when a new president takes power because they think they're competent and they know they're willing to change. So I think you would have to prove additionally that the man
I would be sympathetic. I would be sympathetic to that line of argument if there was an initial change in Yitzhak Rabin's interaction with the peace process. And for the longest time, it just wasn't until Oslo. And then when Oslo came around...
Well, was there a change? Did he change out the person when he got to Oslo?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Did he change out that guy when he got to Oslo?
Those were for the Washington negotiations. Oslo took place in a back channel, and then it was a different... Yeah, exactly. Okay. And then when it came to Oslo... So... Oslo
doesn't that seem good though? Is that he says the Washington talks don't work. His guy is not working. After a few months, he does something else with a different guy. So what's wrong?
It wasn't his decision. The Oslo took place in the background through Norway, and he didn't actually. It happened after, and then he just switched over to those negotiations. But he didn't take Oslo seriously either, which would be my broader point. So, for example, Oslo it's like a two-pronged agreement to make an agreement. It started in 1993 with the Declaration of Principles.
The agreement handshake. To make an agreement is consensus.
Exactly. So in 1993, they signed the Declaration of Principles, and then 1995, that's where they signed Oslo II, and that's where you get the carving up of the West Bank into the three areas, the creation of the PA, and this is kind of my smoking gun that proves that Yitzhak Rabin was not serious about the Oslo process at all. The settlements increased exponentially, right? The settlements increased 3 times in the West Bank throughout this Oslo process. And in 1995, October 5th, 1995, while he's giving a speech to the Knesset, and this was as Oslo II was being put forth, he goes, the entity that I'm going to give the Palestinians is, quote, less than a state. So he wasn't even offering them a truly sovereign state. Furthermore,
it could be seen as a building point. But yeah.
Well, the whole point of Oslo, keep in mind, in order for Oslo to go forward, the Palestinians had to accept 242, meaning peace and recognition with Israel in exchange for trading the land.
That's justified.
338, which is just a reiteration of 242 after the October 73 war. And they had to agree to accept Israel's quote-unquote right to exist, which I don't, but they did. This is not new.
Right. Isn't the phrase initially, though, is right to exist with... it wasn't just right.
Secure and recognized borders.
The secure and recognized borders are the important part.
Yeah, completely correct. Now, this acceptance from the PLO is nothing new. They already accepted this in Algiers in 1988, but they reiterated this acceptance in 1993 when they were going through with the Oslo peace process. Now, the whole point of Oslo was to eventually have a Palestinian state in the West Bank living alongside Israel, Palestine on the West Bank and Gaza. So if 1995, Yitzhak Rabin is saying, I'm going to give these people less than a state, that negates it. And furthermore, the co-architect of Oslo was Shimon Peres. In 1995, as Oslo II is being rolled out, he's giving an interview to the editors of Newsweek. They ask him, they go, is Oslo II supposed to put forth a Palestinian state? Is a Palestinian state the end goal of Oslo? And Shimon Peres, the co-architect of the project, goes, no.
Okay. But like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't want there to ever be a Palestinian state. It seems to me much more like that he doesn't have a goal of creating a Palestinian state through Oslo II specifically. And
but that was the whole point.
In that direction. And there were steps in that direction. Like the creation of the PAIC is something that is a step in the direction of a two-state state.
Israeli collaborators, what have they done? They policed their own people. They made the occupation cheaper. Jeff Halper has a good paper on this. It's called The Matrix of Control. What ended up happening was the PA was being trained by like the CIA and Israel to just crack down on Israel's enemies on their behalf. They made it cheaper. Furthermore, they're also
the PA's enemies because, like you said, correct. You see them as Israeli collaborators, and there's a lot of people who agree with you. And if someone thinks you're an Israeli collaborator, they're going to kill you, and so therefore, training to stop them is something.
Well, the Palestinians see them as Israeli collaborators, right? Like, I mean, Edward Said in the dawn of Oslo, he made it very clear. He goes, Yasser Arafat has turned into Israel's enforcer. That's the quote he wrote in the paper. It was an essay he wrote. It's called The Morning After, and it was after Oslo.
Yeah, but Israel's not going to accept anything less than someone who is going to take.
Well, then that's not a sovereign state.
But you can't expect them.
Why?
You can't expect them to accept to create a political entity like the PA with someone who is unwilling to take terrorism seriously and is rooted out from within his nation.
Well, my point is the PA exists.
That's an unreasonable expectation. It's an extremely unreasonable expectation,
well, no,
right? Because you're expecting a democratic state, which is accountable to the voters, to work with someone who kills the voters.
PA, that exists. Whether I like it or not, that exists.
Yeah.
My deeming of it as Israeli collaborators is irrelevant. It exists. That's just my personal opinion. They're Israeli collaborators, in my opinion, and the opinions of a lot of Palestinians too. The fact that they exist is an indisputable fact. Now, when it comes to the PA, they have tried to exert statehood and national self-determination on a mere 22% of historic Palestine, right? That was the whole point of Oslo. That was the whole point of Camp David. That was the whole point of every peace initiative, was to have a two-state solution as per the international consensus. I don't like that consensus. I've said that many times, but that just unfortunately is what it was. And the Palestinians were serious about making that happen, and the Israelis weren't. If the whole point of Oslo was to get to a point where you could have like a final status negotiation, and the end goal was explicitly to have a Palestinian state for the Palestinians, and then the people who are involved and the architects of that process are saying, I'm going to give them less than a state. I'm not going to give them a state. That's not the end goal of the process. Well, publicly they're saying that is the end goal. The end goal is supposed to be a Palestinian state.
Well, you said that the guy said to the paper that it wasn't going to be an end goal, and so it seems like it is.
No, that was a private meeting with editors in Newsweek.
It was like quote off the record.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have clarified that.
Okay, that's a kind of. But yeah, thank you for clarifying it.
Yeah. So, furthermore, we can, dive into these intricacies all day, but the fact at hand is during the Oslo peace process, the settlements increased threefold. They tripled. And I'm sure you and I would agree.
This you said is like kind of your main point, right?
Well, I'm sure you and I would agree,
about
right?
Oslo.
That the settlements are an impediment to peace. Like you would agree with me on that?
The settlements are indeed an impediment to peace, but however, I don't. The argument you're constructing now is quite similar to some things that people say in the U.S. Is that they'll be like, okay, under X president, there was more immigration or there was less immigration.
They're not
but
immigrants.
It doesn't. Is that the? No, I know.
They're war criminals.
I know. They're not okay, but
they are war criminals because they violate the 49th article of the Fourth Geneva Convention. They are war criminals because you cannot transfer your civilian.
It's not going to be enforced upon.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah, like I said, yeah.
They are war criminals.
Technically, they're war criminals.
They're not,
right? And they're not immigrants. But is that the things that cause these movements of people are usually not like specific directives from the executive authority. It usually has to do with like the socioeconomic factors. Like what happened in the U.S. is that the reason why there's massive surges sometimes in our immigration is because something happens, a few nations down or a few nations south, and people want to leave, and so they come up to the U.S. Is that what the president does? Is usually not. Doesn't really control that. And so what I think is that it seems likely to me that what the prime minister of Israel does not really control the settlements and how much they're increasing by and how much they're decreasing by.
First of all, that they did. They specifically Barak, he colonized the West Bank 10 times faster than Netanyahu, and what he did was he allocated tons of resources and funding to do so. There's also the Galilee Protocol, which was passed by the Knesset in, I think it was in 73, but that explicitly said we're going to allocate a bunch of funding. We're now going to permit private industrialists to colonize these territories, which at the time included the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights. So the settlement movement is inextricably linked with the government. The way that the settlements work is they originally pop up as... But what you
said is that the Knesset is the one who's passing these bills for acquisitions. It's not something that
it's the Israeli government.
Negotiator can do. Yeah,
it's the Israeli government.
The Israeli government is not a single entity. And
Ehud Barak personally took credit. Ehud Barak personally took credit for the settlement growth during his premiership, just so we know. And he's the one who went the furthest with the peace process.
Okay, nice, but it's very common for politicians to just take credit for stuff for votes.
I want to touch on a few things that you said earlier before I forget. You said that socioeconomic reasons is why people go and colonize the West Bank. I don't find that to be a convincing argument. I mean, I know a lot of people who are stricken by poverty and they wouldn't dare go colonize the remaining 22% of a state.
It's like, people that are very virtuous and they don't want to commit
Well,
war
it's not
crimes.
about being a virtuous. It's just about not being a war criminal.
Yeah, okay. But the thing is, when you look into society, where there are thousands of people that are war criminals, or millions, even depending on how you would count or whatever, when it's not reasonable to expect someone in poverty to not engage in similar behavior to the other people in that society. I think that's an unreasonable ask.
So you think it's unreasonable to ask people to not colonize the remaining 22% of historical Palestine that the Palestinians are able to have?
When pressed by socioeconomic factors, it's unreasonable to expect people to act significantly different than everyone else.
So if a German in World War II was facing economic hardship, would they be able to go colonize Poland?
I mean, it would be illegal under international law.
Okay, well,
what's unreasonable to expect them to not do it?
What do you mean it's unreasonable, dude?
I mean,
it's incredibly unreasonable.
That specific thing. There was tens of thousands probably of Germans who went to Poland as part of a project to have Germans in Poland to control it, right? As part of World War II. That's specifically what we're talking about, right?
Well, yeah, so, I mean, just transferring civilian populations, like they're used for that. It's a war crime for a reason, because they could then potentially be used for referendums, right? I'm sure you would agree when it comes to Russians putting Russians into the Crimea that would be wrong, right?
Well, they kind of already have it at this point.
So you're so you're in favor of that.
If government is not supposed to do it, but like when you talk about the individual, it's really hard to judge them, in my opinion, when the government's going along with it, and it is just something I wouldn't judge an individual on as part of a mass movement.
So you would not judge. So they're small beans.
I mean, people have complicated lives, man.
I mean, I get it, bro, but there's a difference between being like financially strucken by poverty and going to steal a fucking Kit Kat from the 7-Eleven and going to colonize the West Bank. Those are different. There's severity here, right?
No,
different severities.
No, I actually no, not at all. So when I say colonize the West Bank, I mean, most colonists aren't like the ones who like go out there and like rough people up or kill them.
But their presence
the ones that are poor and go into the West Bank is what they do is that there's someone builds a development and it's cheaper land, and that's the only way they're going to be able to have a place for their kids that's not like a 1-bedroom apartment. And so they go there, and then they have a little bit more room, and they're able to raise their children. And
so just because it's cheaper, they should be able to go and colonize the West Bank and deprive the Palestinians of even more of their own homeland. Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, realistically, that's what people do when they feel need.
I'm not asking if that. I know that that's what people do. Like, we know that happens. But I'm asking you.
To expect them to be. You're expecting people to be like angels, essentially.
I'm just expecting them to not be war criminals. I'm asking. It's a very low bar, actually.
But is it war criminal?
They are war criminals. This is international, and under international law, you cannot transfer.
You don't commit war crimes, but
but again, I'm not.
You're a little bro by the U.S., and sometimes we have to go to war, and sometimes we commit war crimes. And
international law aside, I think the grievances of an Israeli who might be struggling financially take a backseat to the grievances of the Palestinians who are confined to a mere 22% of their historical homeland and having that encroached upon too. I think if we're assessing just the morality of the situation, take the legal argument out of it, I think that's incredibly fucked up, don't you?
Not really. Also,
so you think it's okay for the settlers to go there?
Can I ask a small clarifying question about the 22% statistic?
Sure.
Is that a measurement based on 22% of what exactly?
Of historical Palestine, of the mandate of Palestine.
What are is that including parts of Jordan? Well,
no.
What is now the nation of Jordan?
It would be Palestine prior to
so
47.
Bordered by the desert in the south, the river in the east, and mandatory
Palestine.
Okay.
Like if we look at mandatory Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza make up 22%. And I was actually being generous by saying the Palestinians get a mere 22% because in reality,
because some of the settlements are.
Well, not only that, Area A, B, and C, which was a product of Oslo II. Thank you very much, fucking Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon. But if you look at what Oslo II did, was it carved that West Bank, which is again a mere 22% of the broader historical Palestine. It carved that West Bank into 3 areas, and the Palestinians only have not even sovereignty, full control, even though the Israelis disrespect this too, full control over a mere 18%, 18A. So they get Area A. So the Palestinians get control over 18% of the 20% of historical Palestine. And you think that the settlers should still...
you cut out.
The Palestinians get control, nominal control, over 18% of the 20% of historical Palestine. And you think that the settlers should be able to deprive them of even more?
I mean, they're gonna do it. Like,
no, but I'm not asking if they're going to do it. Seemingly,
it's something the onus is on the government to do something about it, which is like the primary problem is that the government currently is unwilling to do something about it.
Okay, so you don't want to.
It's not. I don't.
You don't want to address
like,
personal blame. They're just following orders. They're just going along with the currents, right?
Well, it's not. It's on order, but
they're going along with the currents.
It's the nation is going one way. Yeah.
So so would you assign personal blame to say like a Nazi who's just like, well, fuck, man, everybody else is doing it?
Well,
because I would.
Really, to be completely honest. I know you leftists have extremely high moral standards.
No, brother, my moral standards are don't be a Nazi and don't be a settler in the West Bank. It's pretty fucking low, dude.
No, but I'll explain what I mean exactly like this, okay? So you're familiar that like after World War II, there's like a ridiculous amount of people that have like associations with the Nazi Party, right? Like an insane, like millions. And basically anyone who can run a nation, anyone who can operate a nation or any sort of thing needed for a nation at any level has an association with the Nazi Party if they're not a member. You can't just be like, they're all war criminals. Get rid of all of them. You're stripping the state of everything.
You're obfuscating. You're obfuscating because what I'm talking about.
Like it's not.
Brother,
it's not
you're
a
obfuscating.
Moral expectation. Okay.
That's not my claim. This is just a complete straw man. My claim would be the analogous situation would be the Nazis that go and settle Poland, settle Eastern Europe. Those would be analogous to the settlers in the West Bank. I'm not talking about everybody in Germany who may have been part of the Nazi Party or whatever. Fuck them, but I understand there's varying degrees, right? My issue here is that you're defending the settlers in the West Bank who are war criminals and who should be in jail.
Okay, so I mean,
you said that they were an impediment to peace.
Yeah, like as in a bloc, they're an impediment to peace.
Well, if we're arguing what side has been sabotaging the peace process, and you're saying it's the Palestinians, I'm saying it's the Israelis, but then at the same time,
it was specifically only the Palestinians. I don't want to be like, okay, there's only one problem.
But you tried to negate my claim that the issue was the Israelis. And then you go forth by saying...
I think it's not only parts... Like, there's parts of Israel that are problematic and causing problems, but I don't believe it's, like, only...
But you're okay with those settlers, though. Problems. Like, you acknowledge that they caused problems, but you're also, like, not going to condemn them.
I'm not okay with them as a bloc, but I'm not going to take an issue with individuals. I think that's kind of bad form and has an unrealistic moral expectation.
Can I ask you, you're a liberal, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm just Democrat.
Isn't like individualism kind of like the backbone of your ideology? Like, I'm the collectivist. I'm the fucking dirty commie. I'm supposed to be making those arguments.
Individualism is good because, for economics, it's good for talking about people's specific rights over their body. I mean, you would agree with that. And things like that. But
certainly.
I think when
not
you
the
have
economics
specific
part, but,
individual moral analysis, it just seems unreasonable to expect people to behave differently than everyone else in the nation they live in.
You're not trolling me, right? Like, are you like secretly fucking with me right now?
Why would it? No, man.
Okay. Okay. I for a second I was like, hold on, am I getting fucking?
Sorry.
Am I getting trolled?
Who did you think was setting you up, man?
I don't know. I thought like maybe like some. I thought someone was just fucking with me because I cannot believe the position that you're holding here, taking all of this blame away from the actual individual settlers, the individual war criminals. I understand that people are a product of their environments and they act in correspondence with their material needs. Obviously, I understand that, but there needs to be a limit. You cannot go and do war crimes because you are poor or in economic hardship. You can go steal from a fucking Safeway. I could understand that, but you cannot go steal the mere 22 remaining percent of a land that you've already stolen the other 77% of.
I mean, I don't know. Okay, so I'll talk to you about something somewhat analogous in America right now. I mean, you know who runs America right now. It's very very common. And you know, there's a lot of people who voted for him, and he's doing some really horrible things to some people I know. And you know, like children of immigrants, you know, I know people, their father doesn't have papers to be here, but he's been here for decades, and they're very scared, and people, you know, people like that get deported and things like that, and it's horrible. And like 45% of the people who voted, or no, it's like 50% almost of the people who voted, and like 30% of the entire nation voted for someone who supports this. And initially, I was very, very angry at each and every individual, but it's kind of hard to like just live in a state where you're judging everybody in the nation you live in.
Again, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I don't think that everybody who voted for Trump is like an evil Nazi fascist. I don't think that that's the case. I think a lot of them are misguided. Now, when it comes to actual settlers, war criminals,
so why
I think there's a difference
that
there.
A settler is misguided?
Because when you're a settler, you have to understand the context, the colonial context in which you exist. You're going into a land that is already colonized, and you should be able to see the pain that you are inflicting by your presence being there. You're stealing that land. You are depriving the people who are already confined to a sliver of their historical homeland to even less because you want cheaper real estate.
Okay, so you said at the beginning there that you expect them to have an understanding of colonialism, etc.
No. I don't expect them to have the understanding. I expect you to have the understanding because we're talking about the overall morality of this situation. They should be able to see that their physical reality when they are in the West Bank and what they are engaging in is fucked up because they're explicitly denying.
They don't see that, though. Most of them don't like live in a place where they would see that.
So you're
like they kind of may know it happens on the edges of the settlements.
So do you think settlers are equivalent to Trump supporters?
Yeah, pretty much.
Come on, dude.
It's kind of, I mean,
You're trolling. This is not a real debate.
I'm not trolling.
Brother, you're telling me the mechanic down the street. If you
don't want to talk, we can...
Well, it's not that I don't want to talk. You're telling me that the mechanic down the street who voted for Trump because he thinks like his fucking tariff plan is going to bring economic prosperity to him, and the fucking settler who does war crimes in the West Bank are the same. I don't know. I feel like we're just operating in completely different realities right now.
Well, it's because the war crimes you're describing aren't like, they don't involve the person specifically doing anything that without greater knowledge it looks bad at all. What you're talking about as a war crime is a guy buying a house somewhere he's not supposed to buy a house and moving in with his family.
Okay, so the way that the settlements pop up,
that feels bad to an individual when they engage in the behavior, unless they have like a really like big knowledge and complicated like understanding of law. First of all, they have to have an understanding of international law because it's not intuitive to people. Unless you live on the edges, in which case that's
a lot of these people are settling. A lot of these people are setting the lands for religious reasons and to create facts on the ground. Like that's the government motto, right? Facts on the ground.
It's more the government guidance that they want to change the facts on the ground than the individual. Yeah.
But you understand that they work in tandem, right? Because the way that these settlements pop up is they first start as military outposts, Nahal settlements, which are supposed to be paramilitary outposts, and then they transition into civilian settlements, but the individuals involved don't change because there's mandatory conscription. So the people who start there as paramilitary or military outposts then transition into civilian outposts, but the military outposts are illegal under Israeli law and international law. And then when they transition to the civilian outposts, they're just illegal under international law, but the IDF protects them throughout the entire process. So they are inextricably linked with the apparatus. You can't say that this is just lone actors. It's the overall project.
Like you're right. It creates a system, but the system is created by like individuals who want to push.
Okay, let's talk about something more productive. Let's get back to what we were talking about. Let's talk about Camp David, because we talked about Oslo. Now let's talk about Camp David. I am holding the position.
I am not an expert on Camp David.
Okay, well, that's where like the mythology comes, right? Like that's where the mythology comes from. Where like, Ehud Barak.
We'll have something to talk about. You go and describe, and then I'll.
So the mythology is that Ehud Barak offered a generous offer to the Palestinians. They turned it down. Clinton tried to spare this with the Clinton proposals, and then the Palestinians didn't go forth with it, and they just didn't cooperate. Now that's just untrue. Mm-hmm. That's just an untrue statement. Mm-hmm. It's an untrue sequence of events. What actually happened was the Israelis didn't take it serious. Ehud Barak, who was the Israeli prime minister at the time, he was the one who went the farthest with the rhetoric of the peace process. Also, at the time, was one of the most aggressive when it came to building settlements in the West Bank. The only person who rivaled him was Yitzhak Shamir. He had before Ehud Barak's prime ministership in 1999, there was 3 years of Netanyahu's first term. And in Netanyahu's first term, he built less settlements than Ehud Barak did in the next 2 years while he was going along with the peace process. Furthermore, in his 1999 speech, his election speech, the first speech that he ever gave, he goes, "Under no circumstance will I withdraw to the pre-67 borders," fundamentally negating the entire conception of the peace process in his opening speech. And then he goes, "I'm going to annex East Jerusalem in perpetuity." In the same speech, he goes, "It'll be our unified, eternal capital." Keep in mind, East Jerusalem is illegally annexed. It's been unilaterally annexed. It was taken over in 60.
Law says that once it's taken over in 67,
and then formally annexed in 1980.
That doesn't matter what happens after that. If you're moving people into a place you annexed illegally, nothing can change, and it becomes permanently a Palestinian place. And so, if you do anything to it, then you're committing a war crime.
Well, the reason I bring all of this up is that you have all of these admissions from the guy saying, "I'm not going to abide by the international consensus of the peace process," but then he's going through the charade of the peace process and then blaming the Palestinians when it fails.
Okay, but can I say is it correct for me to say that what you're describing here is the desire to change the facts on the ground, and then therefore they're just burning time while they change facts on the ground so that it can legitimize their claims?
Certainly,
you don't like it. So you're saying that when you change the facts on the ground, it doesn't. Then we should go by what it was before the facts changed, right?
I think all of the settlers who went into illegally occupied territory should get the fuck out. That's my position. I don't think they should be there.
But okay, so what I like to say is that when you change the facts on the ground, to a certain degree, it doesn't really matter why the facts on the ground change. When the facts on the ground do change, when like parts of these settled areas are just 100% like Jewish Israelis living in them for the past many decades, some going back to like 50 years even in some of the situations. Like, okay, so it was annexed illegally, but now for 50 years, the people have been living on it. So I don't really see why, just because it's illegal for an international law, you should really change that.
Two things. Camp David and the Tablet Talks, the Palestinians, just so you know, they accepted a bunch of these settlements. They said, okay, that's fine. We'll accept some of these. They already accepted those. I don't think they should have, but they did in that process. Second of all, the idea that they're just there creating facts on the ground and they don't serve a utilitarian purpose is not true. There's tons of utility in there, in those settlements. For example, they carve up the West Bank. They carve off little enclaves of Palestinian populations, and they make it so that they're cut off from like their family members in a different enclave. So these settlements and the settler-only roads, which again are built on land that they have to annex again from the Palestinians because it's their land, they're Israeli-only roads, those are stolen from the Palestinians in the West Bank. So the settlers do actually serve a utilitarian purpose. They carve that shit up.
They do. It is part of the plan.
They prevent continuity, right? There's no contiguous state because of the settlers.
But I think the fact that the facts on the ground change is extremely important. Even no matter what the reason for, I think it's really important. Changing the facts is something that has it's just very important. You're gonna move these people away from where they've been living for 50 years. That's not gonna fly. And additionally, since Israel is the dominant person in this situation, the dominant force in this situation, they shouldn't. It's unreasonable to expect them to move their people out of areas.
Sounds like you're advocating for a one-state solution. Just one equal democratic state from the river to the sea? Unless you're making the claim that Israelis can go into the West Bank and colonize that, but Palestinians can't go back to their rightful homes that they were expelled from. Is that the claim that you're making?
Well, they're not capable of doing so.
Well, I'm not asking about what they're capable of doing. I understand the apparatus of the Israeli state is barbaric. It's very military. It's militarized. It's not going to let it happen. But we're having a theoretical discussion right now. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the reason that there's a Palestinian state that is just this rump, non-contiguous Bantustan today is because of the Israelis, not because of Palestinian intransigence.
Well, they are intransigent.
How?
They have expectations of, that.
What are their expectations? International law?
International law. So international law should be upheld, but unfortunately, you don't get to say that when you have very little of the cards. They have they don't have the cards. They can't.
You're saying that they're asking for too much.
Expectation.
You're saying that they're asking for too much. They have agreed to be confined, the PLO, to be confined to that 22% of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza. They're okay with that.
Yes.
They're okay with accepting the settlement blocks. They're okay with, they were even okay with like a bunch of random limited right of return things. Like they conceded during Taba.
Any right of return.
Why?
Because it's an unreasonable expectation for the Israeli
Should the Jews have the right of return? Because the Jews have the 1950 law of return, which states that if you're a Jew born anywhere in do you think that that's okay? If you're a Jew born anywhere in the world, you should be able to go to Israel?
It's no longer very important. No, it's not. It's not in the law that should be upheld currently. I think it is very important for a time, but it's not currently important.
So wait. Why was it important for a time to allow a Jew born anywhere in the world to go to Israel if they have no connection to it, but a Palestinian who was ethnically cleansed from their home less than 80 years ago can't return?
So what do you think was the implementation of the law of return? Like, can you give me like an example case?
The ingathering of the exiles? What are you asking me?
Yeah, it's like the ingathering of the exiles. The Jews were living throughout the Middle East in these
whoa. Hold on. Because first, it was Ashkenazi Jews who went there, right? The bulk of which are converts. They're converts to Judaism. I'm not saying that there's no... I'm not saying that there's
converts to Judaism. They're maybe someone converted like 50 generations ago, but like they're not converts to Judaism. Like,
I'm saying a large portion of Ashkenazi Jews are converts to Judaism. There is still discernible.
Not at the time. It's more in the U.S. currently. It is a lot more. Around the world currently, it's a lot more. But at the time, very few. Like, who would want to sign up to be Jewish in the year 1945? Like, come on.
I didn't say that they converted in 1945. They come from a lineage of converts.
Oh, okay. So so you're saying they don't have a genetic heritage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. They don't.
Okay, but then how is that ingathering? How is that ingathering the exiles if you just conceded that they're fucking converts?
Oh, because the genetics aren't super important.
So that they could have this ephemeral, loosely. I just believe that I have
ephemeral. It's not ephemeral. There's a cultural continuation that's measurable.
Okay, so you think a cultural continuation that you could just fucking hallucinate or whatever, you feel it, is enough to make you okay?
It's something that culture is very important.
Okay, sure. So you have this cultural connection to the land, and that gives you the right to go and colonize Palestine. But a Palestinian who is born in the land physically is kicked out at the barrel of a gun and is not allowed to go back. That's what you're telling me.
Well, we're not talking about...
We are talking about that because you said that the law of return was okay for a time while simultaneously saying that the right of return was not.
It filled a very important need.
Okay, well, I'm not talking about if it fills a need, right? Bro.
It filled it in 1950. The need is that there's all these nations popping out throughout the Middle East run by these insane nationalists who want to purge their land of everyone who's not like...
Do you think that the Israelis were not insane nationalists? Do you think the Israelis were not insane nationalists?
They were kind of insane nationalists. If you go, they're kind of insane nationalists when you look at the beginning.
They didn't even like the Holocaust survivors. They didn't even like the Holocaust survivors. They thought that the Holocaust survivors. They used them, but they were disrespectful. They called them mice in flight. They called them soaps. They said that we are trying to build the Sabra, and they are the Galut. They are the diaspora Jew. They make us look bad. That's why, for the longest time, they've lived under the poverty line in Israel. I think still to this day. They live under the poverty line.
You're saying Jews that moved after 48 live under the poverty line?
I'm saying the Zionist project looked at Holocaust surviving Jews with contempt. Holocaust survivors.
Arrogant, the kind of arrogant bastards.
Right, but you just said that you just criticized the region for being a bunch of nationalist fanatics when actually that's not really the case, right? Nation states were imposed onto that region.
It was pretty nationalistic and fanatic.
Nasser didn't exist in 1948. He was not the leader of Egypt. It was King Farouk.
It was like a few years later.
King Farouk. It was 52 when he came to power and the free officers, right? Anyways.
But it was a rising movement at the time, you know. And
but it was a rising nationalism in the Middle East was a rising movement. It existed dialectically to European colonialism. That's the reason it existed. Because prior to that, the nation states that were imposed onto the Middle East were a European conception. That's what it was. The Europeans that drew the lines.
Colonies, yeah.
Right. So nationalism, in that sense, existed dialectically to European colonialism. It wasn't like it just came out of nowhere because they're fucking random. Fanatics or whatever.
They saw what the Europeans had in Europe, and they wanted that.
That's what the Zionists did. The Zionists structured their colonialism.
You think an Egyptian nationalist doesn't like look at Europe and be like, "Oh, they run themselves. I want to run themselves too. I don't want the Europeans running me."
Egyptian nationalism situated itself in opposition to European colonialism and European nationalism. That's the difference. Yeah. Zionism situated itself in alignment with European colonialism. That's why the founders, the thought leaders of Zionism called themselves colonists, called their project colonialism.
Yeah, I know. If you're talking about the ideological roots of Zionism, you're correct. But it's not something.
But that's different than that's a different type of nationalism than a defensive nationalism. That's my point.
Well, the defensive nationalism can be quite offensive at times. If you look what happened in some of these nations, like if you're not part of a favorite ethnicity, not good things. Okay. Not good things at all. But, you know, they can just strip your they'll strip your if you're born there and you're naturalized, they'll strip your naturalization, they'll kick you out, or they'll lock you up until you agree to leave, or they'll just kill you if you're part of a race that they deem as a threat to them. Like these defensive nationalisms that many of these leftists have, like, think about. So generally it's in a defensive nature and a reaction to an offensive nationalism, but the end effect is not really different at all. I don't understand why people care. I mean, I've seen some of your older videos where you're like, okay, so I don't have to defend Putin, but I can think that NATO is bad, which I disagree with. But you're seeing that there's like these two entities. Yeah. There's like the more dominant entity, and there's the other entity that's like less dominant, and they're both struggling, and they're both doing some of the same bad things. And I don't see why you have to be justify quote defensive nationalism when it does like the same thing.
I'm explaining it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Zionism was modeled after European offensive colonialism and nationalism, and that gave rise to Arab nationalism. It's not entirely true because Arab nationalism was already kind of sparking.
Exactly,
but that was sparking to the Ottomans.
By British as well. Yeah.
Well, it started in opposition to the Ottomans.
Zionism did not cause Arab nationalism.
No, but it exacerbated it. It exacerbated it significantly.
Yeah, because they feed each other. Yeah.
Well, it exacerbated it significantly because you could see. Even like what I'm sure you would call the double Nakba, like the Jews leaving the MENA region for Israel. That happened, the expulsions when they did happen, which were very rare. There was a ton of combinations. There was pull factors, push factors. It's not true that there was this uniform mass expulsion of Jews from the MENA region. But the ones who left their countries and faced hostility in their countries, which did exist, that was a direct cause of Zionism in the region, European colonialism in the region.
Not always.
Not always. After 48, it explicitly was linked to that.
It's like, yeah, so, 48, an Israeli state is created, and they're like, okay, what the fuck? I don't want these Jews to have a state in the Middle East, and, there's Jews in my state. What are they doing? I guess they're spies. Let's kick them out, or let's start mistreating them.
That was very rare. Can you tell me where that happened? Can you tell me where that happened?
Well, I know it happened to my family in Egypt, so...
It did happen in Egypt. I would say in Egypt was probably like one of the only places where you had actual expulsions.
Some of the most extreme was that happened in Egypt, where they
happened.
Yeah. Yes.
But that happened after David Ben-Gurion invaded. So again, it was a cause and effect thing. It's not to excuse it.
Not only. It increased after there started to be like direct conflict between.
Right. But again, in any context in the world, you're going to have blowback when you start a violent expansionist and colonial movement. You're going to have blowback. That just happens.
But
I'm not saying it's right.
But couldn't you say that, like, you know, as you acknowledged, these nationalist movements happened before Zionism, or before Zionism had like succeeded to a degree.
Well,
and so wouldn't you say that the state of Israel being stronger is part of the blowback to those movements? I think that would be a reasonable statement based on what you said. Is that like?
Are you asking me if? Sure. So I will say the
like
iron wall, the iron wall in Israel, that was actually kind of concocted before the prevalence of Arab nationalism. So Ze'ev Jabotinsky, who wrote the Iron Wall, which is pretty much Israel's modus operandi when contending with the Arab world, what it states is that militarily, Israel has to become so strong and never cooperate with the Arabs, beat them down militarily to the point where they're ready to submit, and then they can proceed in negotiations from a position of strength. But that doctrine, the Iron Wall, that predates, that well predates the rise, the pinnacle of Arab nationalism in the region. So Israel had already articulated its plan to do what it was going to do before that.
They didn't read Jabotinsky. Okay. First of all, that specific statement of Jabotinsky is reasonable for him to say based on the Jewish
he says we're doing colonialism and the Arabs are going to react the way they're going to react because their response would be rational because we're doing colonialism.
That's correct.
Yeah, but that's not good. They started it. They fucking went into the region where they shouldn't have been.
There's you know why they did it though.
Why they did what? Sorry.
Why they did the colonialism.
Why Zionists did colonialism?
Why they did it.
Because they wanted to make a Jewish state.
Yeah, you know why?
Anti-Semitism, nationalism.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was quite bad, you know.
I'm fully aware it was quite bad. If you want to get into the specifics there,
reaction for the Jewish people to
hold
desire
on. Let's slow things down here. I have a response to this. First and foremost, the second Aliyah. This was made up of people fleeing pogroms in Russia and Eastern Europe. What happened was the people who actually went to Israel made up less than 10% of the people who were fleeing persecution. After the Holocaust, the remaining 3 million Jews in Europe.
They tried going home. Yeah.
After the Holocaust, the remaining 3 million Jews in Europe, only 10% of them went to Israel. The remaining stayed in Europe, and they were safer than the ones that went to Israel. Furthermore, you could see Chaim Weizmann saying that the Ukrainian Jews who were facing pogroms during the Russian Civil War, you could hear him saying that if even a single of those comes to Israel, they will come here and they will ruin the movement because they are not Sabra, they're not muscular Jews.
Because he's a bigot, man.
He was one of the formative
other Jews, man.
Brother, he was one of the formative fucking leaders of Zionism. And you're saying that Zionism was created to save Jews because Jews faced persecution, which I don't contend with. I completely understand. They did face anti-Semitism. I don't contend with that. But the thing is, when the leader of the fucking movement is saying, hey, these Jews in Europe who are facing anti-Semitism can't come here because they're going to ruin our movement that you say is ostensibly to take care of Jews who are facing anti-Semitism, that doesn't make sense.
So I'll let you in on a secret, okay? The ideological Zionists are not the main cause of the existence of the state of Israel. Essentially, they started their thing, and basically their movement got hijacked by people who decided that they felt that they couldn't live where they were living, and they needed to find somewhere else. And so they basically went to Israel, joined the Zionist movement by doing so, and hijacked it. It's not like that is like the majority of people in Israel are descended from those now. It's not like a super big majority, but it is the majority. Like, well,
can
actually,
I ask you,
depending on how you count it, it's a big majority. Yeah, what?
Can I ask you, your argument is that Jews faced anti-Semitism, therefore they have the right to do create a colonial nationalist project in the Middle East.
I don't like the word right, but
okay, but that's why you think it's reasonable that they did it. Do you think it would be reasonable for Romani people who faced a very similar plight? They were also targeted in the Holocaust. Do you think it would be reasonable if they went and said, hey, we have an ancestral claim to a piece of land in northern India, which they, by the way, would have a much stronger genetic ancestral claim to than Ashkenazi Jews, if that's something that you care about?
Detail, though, is that they have a higher genetic connection to it, but they actually didn't even know they were from there until the scientists were able to prove it, since they have zero cultural connection to it.
Are you talking about Roma?
No desire to go,
Roma people?
They actually have no desire to return to northern India.
But I'm saying, I understand,
but cultural heritage. So
what I'm trying to explain to you is
happen. They just wouldn't.
No,
happen.
but this is a cop out. This is a cop out because I'm trying to get you to contend with a hypothetical. This is a cop out. What I'm trying to say is, hypothetically, if Roma, who faced a similar persecution to the Jewish people, very similar, they were killed in the Holocaust, exterminated in the Holocaust, if they said, we want to create a ethno-state in northern India, do you think they should be allowed to do that because they suffered?
Allow is I don't understand why the word allow.
Do you think
there,
they should?
It would be reasonable to expect them to do so,
and they should go and ethnically cleanse the people who are already there.
They might need to, but it would be reasonable to expect if they had a connection to it that they remembered, and if they felt a pressing need, then it would be reasonable to expect them to do so. And
the Ashkenazi link to the Middle East is dubious. You cannot base an ethno-state and a colonial project. You cannot base. You cannot, brother. You cannot ethnically cleanse the people who are actively currently there because you think 3,000 years ago you used to be there. Your ancestors used to be there. That's not enough of a justification to ethnically cleanse the current inhabitants of the fucking land. That makes no sense.
Is your dubious statement because they're not, like you said, majority genetically descended from them? It's like a minority of the.
Well, that's because
why is that important?
It's actually not important to me. I should clarify. That's what they claim. They base their claim to the land because of the ingathering of the exiles.
Say because they feel like they want to have a connection because they have a cultural connection, and so they make like greater than true claims about the genetic connection.
Okay,
but it's not. I don't think it's part of the.
Answer this. My family is Italian. I feel as though I have a connection with London because the Roman Empire used to conquer it. Should I be able to go and like kick a fucking British dude out of... Should I be able to go and kick my friend Chris, who's my podcast co-host? Should I be able to kick him out of his house and take his house because the Roman Empire used to fucking conquer his land?
You can move there.
No, but I'm asking, can I go and...
Hold on. If you're facing current persecution in Canada, which I don't think you are you?
No.
Okay. If you're facing current persecution in Canada, and London doesn't let you in, right?
Yeah.
The British, they don't let you in. They would be obligated to by their own internal laws, and by international law. But let's say they didn't, and then you went in there by yourself. That would be reasonable. I know people who've done that, and I think that would be reasonable.
So what you're referring to now is like refugee status. People should be able to seek out asylum and have the refugee status is a different thing. What I'm talking about is settler colonialism.
That's an argument that you came up with. I didn't come up with the framework. You came up with the framework.
What framework? What framework?
The framework of you returning to the parts of the Roman Empire. Okay.
So you think that I can go
you came
to
up
London?
With the framework.
Wait, no, but you're not understanding. You're misunderstanding what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say, do I have the right or not to seek refuge or seek asylum in Britain? Sure, of course I do. I'm asking, if I have a dubious link to London because my ancestors were part of the Roman Empire and London was at one point part of the Roman Empire, do I have the right to go and ethnically cleanse? Do Italians have the right to go ethnically cleanse the people living there right now?
You don't have a right to ethnically cleanse.
Okay, then why did the Zionist Jews who went to Palestine have the right to ethnically cleanse the people who were there because of their dubious link to the land?
They didn't have a right to ethnically cleanse.
Okay, but then why did they do that? Why are you defending the action that they did it?
Because they felt a compelling need for their own existence.
Dude. But do you not see like this is just logically fallacious?
Me and you care a lot about... Okay, so you probably don't actually personally care about rights specifically that much, but you're working within a liberal framework that has international law and like rights, right? Is that correct?
But I can also make a moral argument.
I also don't care that much about like specific rights by like natural law.
Then answer it on a moral paradigm.
So morally, if you are in danger and you travel to a separate place and then the people there reject you and then you feel like you need to establish a place for yourself with there, and you have to do some violent things that might kill people to do so. That's a reasonable like narrative of a person's life, and I wouldn't hate them. I wouldn't think that's a horrible thing for them to do. I think they made reasonable choices at every step there. And
okay, first and foremost, there's a bit of nuance here. The idea that the original Zionist settlers were completely ignored by the Palestinians and they just wanted to coexist and the Palestinians were being mean to them is not true. Okay, there were
what
plenty.
do you mean
Hold
by
on, there were
Zionist,
plenty.
and what time are you talking?
Like first Aliyah, second Aliyah is where it got really bad.
So there were some ones that went there before the first Aliyah, where it was
right, and even then, what they did was they coerced the Arab population into exploiting their labor. This is something that they used to do, and then with the second Aliyah, you had
so you're like, oh no, they exploited
no, but they just
labor.
treated them. They just degraded them. Okay, how about this? Ahad Ham, who was a Jewish journalist, and he wrote in 1891, he said, the Zionist settlers treat the Arabs with barbarity. They beat them, they're savage to them. He wrote that in 1891. So the idea that the Zionists just went... but hold on. The idea that the Zionists just went there so that they could live side by side with their neighbors and sing Kumbaya, that's not the truth. What they wanted to do was not to join the existing polity there, but to replace it. So what they did was they got there, they enacted something called the conquest of the labor market. They barred the Palestinians from the market. They usurped their villages. They went behind their backs and pressured the British to overturn Ottoman land customs and then evict Palestinians from their land that they've been living on for generations, all behind their backs. Didn't even inform them of the process. This is not how you coexist with your neighbors if you're seeking refuge. If I'm a refugee, I go somewhere to seek refugee status and join that polity because it's offering me refuge. These Zionist settlers weren't interested in that. They wanted to replace that society and ethnically cleanse and transfer the people who were already there. That's different.
You're correct. Is that you're talking about an indictment of the early Zionists and the ways that they would use to take control of more land. But I don't feel compelled to defend those people. I feel compelled to defend everyone who moves to Israel as a reaction to violence going against them. And then since that's the majority of the people who make up Israel at this point, then I feel compelled to defend Israel. It is. You can run the statistics. There's millions of people. But there's at least hundreds of thousands of Ashkenazim from escaping the Holocaust. Then there's more that come from Russia and the Soviet Union a bit later. You have the people from out the Middle East, and there you go. It's like there you go. It's the majority of the people.
Okay, first and foremost, the Jews who stayed in Europe after the Holocaust, which was the vast majority of them, by the way, ended up being safer than the ones that went to Israel, because in Israel they assumed the position of the perpetual occupier and aggressor in the region and provoked their neighbors. In the short
term, yes. In the short
term,
no,
even today. Do you think do you think in October 7th would happen in Berlin today?
No, but you could get killed. That happens. Jews get killed.
But I could get killed, brother. I could get killed.
Yeah,
I could go
get killed. What religion? And you said you're an Italian man?
Yes.
And you atheist probably?
Yeah.
Or are you someone, okay. Like, how many people go and try to kill you for being an Italian or an atheist? It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. Okay, what about my black friends? Because I see them get discriminated against all the time.
Get mistreated again. Yeah, it's
so
bad.
should they get an ethno-state somewhere? Should they be able to go somewhere in the Middle East or somewhere, wherever, say Africa, whatever, and supplant the existing society there?
It's reasonable for black people to desire to go back to Africa and establish a state for themselves. However, they tried it and it wasn't very successsucul.
Liberia?
Yeah, it just they tried it. I thought, they're trying it.
Let's dial in on Liberia.
Fine. I don't know that much about Liberia. I just don't.
Okay, let's just dial into it. In the 1820s, the American Colonization Society said, we're going to take freed black slaves from the Americas, give them arms, give them the means to oppress people in Liberia, what then became Liberia, send them over to Africa, create this hierarchy where they become the settlers and oppress the indigenous Liberians. Do you think that is acceptable because those people who did that oppression were victims? They were freed slaves. They experienced racism, so they can go do it to someone else?
I'll give it the same treatment as I give it to the Israel, okay? Is that if the reason why they're going for there is because they have fear for themselves and their family and their security, and where they're coming from, then that's understandable, and I don't judge them badly morally.
But they're killing people in the process.
For, like, personal profit, they don't.
They're killing people in the process.
People die when you do things that you need to do.
Okay, bro.
You're
trolling me. This is not a real. You're not real, right? Like, this is a troll.
I mean, you can continue to follow me on Twitter after we have this discussion, and like you won't find me describe me as a non-person. I'm not a non-person. Like,
well, because my chat is convincing me that you're just like fucking with me.
Okay, bro, your chat.
Are you seriously? Do you seriously hold these, or are you just trying to like fuck with me and like waste my time?
No, I seriously hold these views, but like
Okay,
Your
then
chat
just
is
answer this.
probably like half Hassan's chat, and they always pretend that everyone they don't like is either dishonest or extremely stupid.
Okay, hold on. Just give me one second.
So like they're not like,
your argument is that
online leftists are not known for like their
I get
assumption that other people are normal. You know?
Can I ask you something? You're making the argument here that if people feel that they've been persecuted or maligned, they can go and do some sort of colonialism, settler colonialism elsewhere and kill the people in the lands that they covet. Would that hold true?
Can implies a right to do so.
Okay, but I'm not talking about. I'm asking, do you think that's morally acceptable? Is that, according to your framework, would you excuse those people if they did that?
With great stress, it'll allow someone to do great things that sometimes
okay, so if they
kill people. Basically,
all it takes for them is for them to feel as though they're persecuted, and they can go do that.
Well, they also are, so it's not they feel. And
well, hold on, I disagree. I don't think
they're not that they're kind of delusional.
I don't think Jews today are oppressed. I don't think Jews today are oppressed. Bro. I just don't think it's like borne out in the data. Like, I don't say that to be offensive. I don't know if you're Jewish or not, and that wouldn't really matter Jewish. To me. Well, I don't say that to be offensive.
You don't think it's borne out in the data? Okay, so there's someone asked me about this like a year ago. So I went to my state because I live in the U.S. and I went to my state, and they have like sheets of all the like a breakdown of hate crimes. Every year they're obligated, but hate crimes, different crime types. They'll have a graph every year that breaks it down. And so I went to my state, looked at the graph for hate crimes, and I looked at for the past like 5-10 years. But basically, since like 2020, the number of hate crimes against Jews, it just goes up every year. Like, but we're not talking like this isn't caused by October 7th. It was going up since 2020. Probably as a cause by like rising like extreme conservatism in the U.S. Not by maybe some of it's caused by like what people see what Israel does, but it's
right.
not.
So when you look into the
cause.
Sure. So when you look into
it's rising, but it's also rising as a percentage of this whole.
So when you look into
I reject your statement.
Sure. So when you look into who gathers this polling and who gathers this information, it comes from typically like the ADL, the FBI, and when you actually look into the specifics of this and what they consider to be an anti-Semitic hate crime, a plethora of these have to do with criticizing Zionists and Zionism. So if you're holding no. Yeah, so if you're holding like
hold on, no, that's not a hate crime. That describes hate. That doesn't describe a hate crime. A hate crime is when there's a crime that's also involved.
Right. But I'm saying a lot of those hate crimes.
Canada, but that's how it is.
No, but I'm saying a lot of those hate crimes, when they're taking place, the crime aspect is taking place because the person is expressing support for Israel or is a Zionist. Say they're graffitiing a synagogue that sells illegal land sales. That would be considered to be an anti-Semitic hate crime when the issue involved is the person is a Zionist and the people involved are mad at the Zionism, not the Judaism or the Jewishness.
So,
but your
argument is a little bit correct, but the thing is you're ignoring something very important, is that people are not always cold and calculated and perfectly measured, and that they're not so careful to find out who's a Zionist, who's not, who's involved in it and who's not. And so what they'll do is they'll go and find a Jew and be like, okay, he's a Jew in a Jewish neighborhood, I'll assume he's a Zionist, and they'll go and they'll pursue him. And such an incident happened last month, 3 blocks or 4 blocks from where I live, where there's a guy coming out of synagogue. He went out through the back way, through an alley, and a dude came up to him and roughed him up and then said, "Free Palestine," jumped in his car and left. So what you would say is that's an anti-Zionist hate crime. Or it's I would
say that's an anti-Semitic hate crime.
Okay.
Was it just some random Jewish guy?
It was just a guy leaving a synagogue with clearly Jewish.
I would have to know more about the situation, but if what you're telling me is there was just a random Jewish dude and someone came up to him, beat him up, and then said "Free Palestine," I would agree with you. That's an anti-Semitic hate crime.
This happens. Okay,
then if that's
describing it as caused by anti-Zionism,
right?
Maybe that's part of the cause, but what they're actually doing is they're doing what you would describe as anti-Semitism.
That would be anti-Semitism, yes. But what I'm saying is
this is the thing. It does happen,
right? Sure, but it does happen. But is it to the point where Jews are systemically oppressed in any regard? I would say no. If you look at the economic statistics, they perform far better than their contemporaries. They are not. Okay. It's not institutionally permitted. It's not institutionally permitted to be an anti-Semite, but it is institutionally permitted to say be an Islamophobe. You can say Zoran Mamdani is little Muhammad and he needs to be deported, but you could not ever say that about a Jewish person, and you shouldn't ever be able to say that about a Jewish person because it's disgusting.
Okay. So your can I go about your statement about the wages
Sure.
and money?
Sure.
Okay. So what you're talking about is what generally when we talk about like black people in the United States, I don't know how it is in Canada. We usually talk when we're talking about like not inherent, but like structural racism. We talk about things like position in society and economic status, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's generally the analysis, and because of that analysis, we started applying that to other races as well. So we apply that to Latinos, and so there's also a discrepancy between white people and Latinos, but it's not as much. I think I don't remember exactly. And then to try applying it to other like Asians and Jews, and when you get to Asians and Jews, it doesn't really work exactly because what happens is that people will come to the U.S. The Asians will, the Asians their parents put all this pressure on them to become doctors, and the Jews as well. They're like, they're doctors and lawyers, like ridiculously disproportionately, things like that. And so they have money, they have some status, but it doesn't mean that people are not going to treat them badly. And it's not like a super serious
but
thing.
Isolated. But what I'm saying is, isolated hate crimes. That happens all of the time. That alone is not how you determine whether or not someone is systemically oppressed.
No, let's not pretend that isolated hate crimes happen all the time. Isolated hate happens all the time to Jews, but it does not happen to people like you.
Certainly. Do you think they don't happen to black people or gay people or trans people?
Yeah, it happens to gay people and trans people and black people.
But those groups also can pair that with actual economic oppression, provable, palpable economic oppression. When it comes to Jewish people, that's just not borne out in the data. They live very privileged lives, and they also have the ability to go colonize Palestine if they don't live a privileged life in the West.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think that
that's a privilege.
Law of return is. I think it is a privilege.
But it's so privileged. It's an incredible privilege. Like my cousin.
I mean, incredible is the kind of a broad. Like I don't think I
it's privileged.
Have a pressing desire to use it.
My cousin is Jewish. My cousin is Jewish, and I always have this like joke with him. Because he doesn't have any connection to Israel. He doesn't give a fuck. He probably hates Israel more than I hate Israel. He goes...
Yeah, I've met many people like this.
Right. He goes, it's ridiculous that I can just go and live in colonized Palestine. I could just go live there just because I was born this way.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's a privilege.
Because he lives in the U.S. or Canada or whatever, and he doesn't have a need. But there's many other places historically where there has been a huge need.
Okay, hold on. Let me just ask, does this logic work for Palestinians? If your logic is that Jewish people are oppressed so horribly that they have to go colonize Palestine, and the ones that go into the West Bank...
Not that they are currently so much, but more that they have been...
Okay, but my point is, if you're excusing all of the horrific crimes done by Jewish Zionists today and have done for the past 80 years in the name of their oppression, would you hold the argument that Palestinians who have been actually subjected to palpable apartheid and genocide in recent years, ethnic cleansing in the past, like better portion of a decade, would you argue that they can base their right to do whatever they want to the Israelis on that oppression?
Well, there's also one more thing which you didn't pick up on because it didn't apply, is that if you're familiar with like concepts of what makes a war just?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things in my view is very, very important to make a war just is you have to be able to like win. If you're not going to win, there's no point in fighting. And there's actually, usually, if you're not going to win, and then it's unethical to fight. Like, if you're going to lose, and you're going to lose people and die, it's unethical to fight. So since they're not capable of doing so, then
the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was unjust because the odds were stacked against them?
Yeah, if I was there, it would be kind of stupid. Because they're going to... Bro! They're gonna, I mean, yeah.
You're lying. You're trolling me.
It makes sense that they would do so, but
you're telling me the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was unjust.
Not okay. They're gonna die anyways, so like they're gonna try. But like
brother.
The Palestinians are mostly not gonna die anyway, so it doesn't.
This is ridiculous.
Struggle, but they won't die anyways. Okay, so
brother, I don't think
we're goodbye now. Like I know we're not gonna see eye to eye. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye. What the fuck, man? The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. For the record, guys, I think the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was very much just. I very much support those brave individuals. What the fuck? You guys could probably tell, like, the whole time I was like, fuck, I want to get out of this so bad. Why did I agree to this? I'm hungry as shit. I haven't eaten anything all day. Oh, fuck. Is Mohsen in the chat? Oh, dude. Did I fail to pin his tweet? Oh, my goodness. You know what I'll do? I'll upload this VOD as a video, and then in the pinned comment, I will post Mohsen's link, his fundraiser. I'm really sorry. I wasn't looking too much at the chat while I was talking to that guy.